Welcome to the deep dive. Today we're getting into something really fundamental to basically all of modern medicine.
Yeah, absolutely critical. We're talking about the integrity of randomized clinical trials. RCTs.
RCTs, the ones everyone calls the gold standard, right? The bedrock for figuring out if treatments actually work.
That's the idea. They're supposed to be the most reliable evidence we have for evidence-based medicine, showing what's effective, what's safe.
Okay, so our guide for this deep dive is an editorial. It's from the journal Frontiers in Research Metrics and Analysis.
And it's brand new, just out June 10th, 2025.
Right. The title is The Integrity of Randomized Clinical Trials: Consensus Statements from Hong Kong to Cairo by Khan, Bueno and Zamora.
So our mission here really is to unpack why the integrity of these, super important trials is even being questioned.
And what's being done about it? What are these global efforts trying to achieve to make sure we can actually trust the evidence?
Exactly, because the evidence guides real medical decisions.
And we're going to touch on some things that might be, well, frankly, a bit surprising. Like, why are these top-level studies getting pulled, retracted?
Mm-hmm. And how do flaws in a study actually ripple out and affect, the care people receive?
And this Hong Kong to Cairo thing, what's that connection? How does a consensus involving experts from seemingly everywhere aim to make medical research more solid?
Okay, so let's dive in. The editorial starts with the basics. Research integrity. Meaning, basically sticking to ethical and professional rules all the way through the research process.
Okay.
And it mentions the World Conference on Research Integrity back in 2019. They endorsed something called the Hong Kong Principles.
Ah, the Hong Kong part. So these are like general rules for researchers, for institutions.
Yeah, sort of universal guidelines for doing research properly, ethically.
And the editorial says these absolutely have to apply in biomedicine, right? Because that's where our medical evidence comes from.
Precisely. And the focus zooms right in on RCTs because, like you said, they're supposed to be at the very top of the evidence pyramid.
Their design, the random assignment, is meant to cut out bias. That's what makes them powerful.
It is. But, and this is the kicker the source gets into, despite that gold standard status, there's a problem.
Uh-oh.
Yeah, there's this growing worry. We're seeing more RCTs being retracted, or journals are flagging them, issuing what they call expressions of concern.
So red flags are going up about the quality.
Exactly. The editorial uses pretty strong language, actually. It talks about defective evidence, potentially getting into the foundation of evidence-based medicine.
Defective evidence, that sounds bad.
It is. And what's interesting is the point that these general principles, like the Hong Kong ones, while good and necessary,
And not quite enough.
they might not be sufficient, especially for something as complicated as an RCT. The authors argue there's a real need for guidelines specifically tailored for clinical trials, for the people actually designing and running them.
So, like, a general be ethical rule isn't detailed enough for the nitty-gritty of a trial.
Kind of. The source argues that, yeah, the Hong Kong principles are valuable, but they have limits for RCTs. Part of it is that research culture can be very specific to a field.
Right.
So generic advice doesn't always land, or it doesn't cover the unique challenges you face running a trial.
Okay, do they give an example of that?
They do. They mention a study from 2023 looking at Australian universities doing health research.
Okay.
And their official codes of conduct, based on those broader principles, didn't really stress some crucial things for trials, like transparency stuff.
Transparency, like?
Things like registering your trial protocol before you start enrolling patients, making your analysis code available so people can check your math, basically.
Right.
Or actively discouraging things like p-hacking.
Okay, hold on. P-hacking. Can you quickly break that down? What is that?
Ah, right. Yeah. P-hacking, sometimes called data dredging. It's basically when researchers, maybe consciously or unconsciously, play around with their data analysis after they see the results.
Play around how?
Like trying lots of different analyses or only reporting the comparisons that look statistically significant, have a low p-value. It makes the results seem stronger or more positive than they perhaps really are.
So you're kind of finding the results you want rather than testing a specific hypothesis.
That's the danger, yes. It's a big integrity issue.
Got it. So if these general principles aren't specific enough to stop things like p-hacking or maybe failing to register a trial up front, which sounds a bit like deciding the rules after the game starts.
Uh-huh.
Where else do these integrity problems show up? The source looked across the whole lifespan of an RCT, right?
Yes, and they found issues popping up at various stages, like right at the start, RCT registration.
Which is supposed to be.
Trials are meant to be publicly listed in places like clinicaltrials.gov before they enroll anyone. It's about transparency, preventing people from hiding trials that didn't get the results they wanted.
Makes sense.
But one paper the editorial points to looked at the Chinese clinical trial registry, and it found, well, significant quality problems,
Such as?
like incomplete entries or registering the trial way too late or missing key information. It just makes it really hard to track what was planned versus what actually happened.
And that's not just one registry's problem.
No, they emphasize this is a global challenge. Problems with registration quality are seen elsewhere too.
Okay, so issues even before patient one. What about during the trial itself, when it's running?
Yeah, the conduct phase.
Hmm.
Responsible conduct. That needs really clear roles, who's responsible for what.
Mhm.
It needs good training for everyone involved. And, importantly, an environment where doing things right, with integrity, is valued more than just, say, getting positive results quickly.
That pressure to publish positive findings must be intense sometimes.
It certainly can be. Then there's the issue of getting the results out. Reporting.
What's the problem there?
Underreporting is a big one highlighted in the source. They mention an analysis of traumatic brain injury trials listed on clinicaltrials.gov.
Okay.
And it raised concerns because a lot of trials that were registered, publicly listed,
Yeah.
they never seem to have their full results published anywhere.
So the findings just vanished, especially maybe if they were negative or didn't show the treatment worked.
Exactly. That's the worry. If only positive trials get published, it seriously skews the overall evidence picture. You get a distorted view.
Definitely. Okay, so registration issues, conduct issues, underreporting. What about after publication?
Well, the source brings up a study in the field of medically assisted reproduction, like IVF.
Right.
And while the total number of retracted papers cited might not have been huge, plagiarism was the most common reason for a retraction in that specific field. And guess what type of study was most often retracted there?
Let me guess. RCTs.
Bingo. RCTs were the most common publication type being pulled for plagiarism in that area.
Wow. Plagiarism in a clinical trial report seems incredibly basic, a fundamental failure.
It really does. So you look at all these things: poor registration, conduct issues, underreporting, even plagiarism causing retractions.
Yeah.
The big takeaway seems to be just relying on peer review by the journal at the very end, it's not enough.
Peer review can't catch everything if the problem started way earlier in how the trial was designed or run.
Precisely. It's a filter, maybe, but it's not foolproof for integrity issues baked in earlier. Action needs to happen throughout the whole process, proactively.
Okay, so integrity isn't just a final check. It's a commitment that has to cover the whole journey.
Right. From the initial idea, designing the study, getting ethics approval, consenting patients.
Actually running the trial according to the plan, analyzing it properly, reporting accurately.
And even being willing to correct the record later if errors are found. It spans everything.
And the responsibility for that lies where?
Everywhere, really. The editorial stresses, it's on the researchers, obviously, but also their universities or institutions, the funders paying for it, the journals publishing it.
A whole ecosystem of responsibility.
Exactly. And they all need those specific actionable guidelines focused on RCT integrity, not just the broad stuff.
Okay, so this is where Cairo comes in, the Cairo consensus.
Against this whole background, the problems identified, the limits of general principles, the editorial explains how this international team got together.
To do what?
To develop these Cairo consensus statements specifically aimed at RCT integrity.
And who was involved in this team?
Well, the source makes a point of saying it wasn't just a small group from one place. They brought in people from, literally, all inhabited continents.
Wow.
Representing different research settings developed and developing. And crucially, they included people from institutions, patient advocates,
Consumer reps, yeah.
professional bodies, funders, journal editors, a really broad church.
That diversity sounds crucial if you want the guidelines to actually be used and accepted in the real world.
You'd think so. And the result was these Cairo integrity statements.
Were they alike?
The editorial describes them as authoritative guidelines based on existing evidence built on consensus, and they cover best practices for the key stages across that entire RCT life cycle we talked about.
So providing that missing piece, the discipline-specific guidance for trials.
That's the idea. It's seen as a really vital step. But the editorial also notes it's not like job done.
It needs updating.
Yeah, it needs to be an ongoing thing. Regular revisions, updates as research methods change, and we learn more about integrity challenges.
Like other ethical guidelines.
Exactly. They compare it to how the Declaration of Helsinki, a major ethical guide for research on humans, was recently updated to include new bits specifically on research integrity.
Okay, so the hope here is that by creating and actually using this kind of specific, tailored guidance,
Like the Cairo Consensus?
we get more trustworthy research. Research that can genuinely improve medicine and maybe help, rebuild or strengthen public trust in science.
That's definitely the goal. Upholding integrity isn't just some academic exercise. It's really an investment in making sure researchers remain a trusted, respected group whose work benefits society, which it absolutely should.
So after all that, what's the bottom line for you listening?
Well, I think it's that RCT's randomized clinical trials, they are absolutely vital for medicine, for
So
policy. But,
concerns about their integrity are real. They're not just theoretical worries.
right, and these concerns can crop up anywhere along the line from the very first idea for a trial right through to after it's published.
And the main takeaway, really, from digging into this source,
Yeah.
it's that just having broad ethical principles isn't quite cutting it for the complexities of RCTs.
Yeah. You need those discipline-specific guidelines, things like these Cairo consensus statements developed by, everyone involved, researchers, funders, patients, journals. That seems crucial for making sure this research we all rely on is truly trustworthy.
Which leaves us with a pretty important thought, doesn't it?
I think so. Given that we know flawed RCTs can sometimes slip through. They get published, they get cited, maybe even influence treatment guidelines.
And correcting the record after a retraction isn't always perfect.
Right. So, knowing all this, how does it affect the trust you place in medical advice or recommendations?
And maybe what questions does it make you ask about the systems that are supposed to ensure research quality before it gets anywhere near your doctor or you?
Mm-hmm.
Something to think about.